This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites, like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies, like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
As a person with a very deep voice, I'm hired all the time for advertising campaigns. But a deep voice doesn't sell B2B, and advertising on the wrong platform doesn't sell B2B either. That's why if you're a B2B marketer, you should use LinkedIn ads. LinkedIn has the targeting capabilities to help you reach the world's largest professional audience. That's right, over 70 million decision makers all in one place. All the big wigs, then medium wigs, also small wigs who are on the path to becoming big wigs. Okay, that's enough about wigs. LinkedIn ads allows you to focus on getting your B2B message to the right people. So, does that mean you should use ads on LinkedIn instead of hiring me, the man with the deepest voice in the world? Yes. Yes, it does. Get started today and see why LinkedIn is the place to be to be. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
Welcome to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Mary Beth.
And I'm Terry.
Each episode, our special guest will bring with them a movie that traumatized.
This week, our special guest is Ryan Larson, editor-in-chief of Ghastly Grinning. Welcome, Ryan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. This is really exciting. I think you are one of my favorite people on Twitter. And you had a birthday yesterday.
Yes.
I know, I was going to say we have to wish you happy birthday.
So
thank you so
birthday.
Much. Yeah, I turned 31, so...
Oh my gosh.
Officially in the 30s.
You are in the 30s.
Yeah.
Did you do anything fun for your birthday?
No, I kept it pretty low-key, honestly. I went pretty hard last year for the actual 30th.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so this year I kind of just hung out. My best friend who I do my podcast with... the Keep Screaming podcast, she just had a son 5 months ago, and so he's like my little nephew, and then my goddaughter was born a week ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we all hung out and watched football, but mostly just an excuse to like hold babies, so we did that all day.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah, it was great.
You know, you're like growing up and becoming an adult when you enjoy hanging out with babies on your birthday, which is not a bad thing. It's just funny.
Yeah, it was very relaxing. It was a good change of pace.
Good. So you are the editor-in-chief of Ghastly Grinning. Can you talk a little bit about that website?
Yeah, so Ghastly Grinning was actually started, I think we're almost on our 2-year anniversary.
That's awesome.
It was probably 3 or 4 years ago now. I got, I started the Shockwaves Horror Movie Club on Facebook because I was a huge fan. Yeah, I was a huge fan of the podcast, but I really wanted to talk about the movies that they were talking about, and my immediate friend group was very limited with the amount of people who were like actually very into horror movies. So I started the Facebook group to kind of try to expand that, and I met some of my very, very close friends now through that group. So what happened is I actually got really drunk on New Year's Eve a couple years ago, and I messaged like 6 of the people in that group, and I was like, "You guys are my favorites in this group," and then out of nowhere, we just bonded and we formed this friendship, and from that, we created Ghastly Grinning. And it was just built from, I got really tired of negativity everywhere in the world. I felt like everywhere I was turning, it was just toxicity and negativity, and I used to be a part of that too. Film criticism had taken such a nosedive into like trying to point out what was wrong, and I was like, this is not why I love movies. I love movies because I love film, and people work really hard on these, and I want to celebrate the genre, and I also want to create a safe space for horror fans, because this was also right around the time of the election. Yeah, and I just was like, I want to create like a safe space for horror fans where they can go and celebrate what they love. And also, you know, we try to do what we can. We're very pro mental health, LGBTQIA. We advocate for female and minority representation in the genre. So yeah, that's kind of how Ghastly Grinning came about. Was just, I really wanted somewhere. I mean, our tagline is "Make Horror Happy." I wanted somewhere where you could go, where no matter what, if you went to the site, you would know that you're reading something positive. And our goal isn't to like ignore the negative things. Those are still, they're still in the reviews, and if we see issues with things, we'll call them out, but we highlight the positive.
And you're not going to just drag a movie through shit. So
exactly, yeah. I won't even lie. There have been a couple times where my writers will reach out and they're like, "Hey, I cannot review this movie because I can't find anything nice to say." And I'm like, "Cool, I'll give it to someone else."
I've done that before. Because I'm like, I don't want to be, like, this is an independent horror maker, and I don't want to be that person that says something nasty. Like, I think someone else should write this review, because I don't want to be that one person that says something negative. It just feels bad. It feels bad, especially when they're small. You get the screeners and the publicist, or, like, the filmmaker themselves, and you're like, I just don't want to trash this, and maybe it's just not my taste.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My dad one time said something that really stuck with me. He said, every band is someone's favorite band. And that's kind of that's how I feel about movies. So I kind of like, I know my writers pretty well. I try to gauge their taste. And I'm like, hey, I think you'll like this. Would you like to review it? Because I think you'll be able to get something from it that maybe I can't.
Cool.
Yeah, and I've actually been following your website since it launched. And it kind of kicked me in the butt to like start my own. So really, I have you to thank, and that's me being honest. I don't think I've ever told you that before.
You definitely haven't, and I feel very honored because I mean, your website I think is truly incredible. I think it's one of the things we need the most. I think queer horror is so important, and your website and the Attack of the Queer Wolf podcast and everything Michael Varrati does are just so integral, I think, to the genre. So that's really, I'm very humbled to know that.
Well, yeah, because like I remember seeing you in the Shockwaves group and thinking, man, this guy's really going for it. And I've been thinking about it for a long time, and then that was just seeing your website grow. Just kind of like was the push. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
But you also mentioned a podcast. Can you talk a little bit about that you do?
Yeah, so the podcast is, so a couple years ago, I've been doing freelance horror journalism now for about 7 or 8 years. Ryan Turk.
Wow.
Yeah, Ryan Turk actually gave me my first gig over when he was still editor for Shock Till You Drop.
No way.
Oh, really?
That's
I didn't
so
realize
cool.
that.
Yeah, and funny enough, so I wrote a review for a TV show that he already had a review for, but he liked my style, so he was like, "Hey, do you want to watch this movie? I need a review for it." And I was like, "Sure." I to this day, I can't remember what the movie was. I wrote the review, and he wrote me back, and he said, "I can't publish this because they're still seeking distribution, and it rips this movie apart." And that's when that was kind of my first like, oh, maybe I should not be mean about like so many things. and then I kind of learned and grew from there. I've always considered him kind of a mentor. That was 8 years ago, and about like 3 or 4 years ago, I really just decided to like double down and go for it. And I was like, I'm really going to put all of my chips into horror. Like, this is what I love. So my best friend, we were actually just talking about it, 11 years we've been best friends now.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. She's also obsessed with slasher movies, and we'd always kind of kicked the tires on the idea of doing a podcast, and we finally just were like, you know what, we just need to do it. We just need to sit down and record one, and once we get going, we'll really like be able to, like, that'll motivate us to keep going. So we're actually headed up on our 2-year anniversary of that too, and it's the Keep Screaming podcast. And it's bi-weekly. Every 2 weeks we pick a different slasher movie, and we dissect it, every part of it. So we dissect it from director, actors, art, music, screenwriting, and then the actual movie, top to bottom. We just go over the entire movie, and then we rank them at the end. And that's another one. Even the movies at the bottom, we aren't trying to say they're bad movies. It's just we look at how something works as a slasher. So, because there's things on there that aren't even, like, we love Happy Death Day to You. It's not a great slasher movie, so it's near like the bottom of our list.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but we are headed up on 2 years of that now too. I think we've never missed a week, and we're about 50 movies in, and we're even covering. Yeah, it's pretty exciting, and we're covering American Horror Story, since it's slasher, this year too.
Cool. Yeah, I'm doing a recap with Joe Lipsit with that.
Oh yeah, no, we read them. We talk about your guys' recap. We compare your guys' thoughts to ours. We're like, oh, what Terry and Joe, like, what they think this week? Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. So before we get into the movie you brought, we're just going to talk a little bit about what we've been watching and what we want to share. So, what have you been watching, Terry?
I want to talk about two things. One is kind of a little caveat, a little note, and about if you listened to last episode, we had Rob Grant on, and he was talking Harpoon. And after we stopped recording, the conversation continued a bit, and he talked about the upcoming Blu-ray that's coming out. And I was so upset that we didn't get that, Mary Beth, on the recording, because he was talking about some of the extras on it, and one of the extras, they asked him, they did a cast or a crew commentary on it, and then they asked him for a director's commentary, and he's like, I don't want to watch this movie again. So he basically took mushrooms and had a psychedelic viewing of it, and he said that he doesn't remember anything about the movie. So it being on there, he doesn't know what he said. So I think that's one thing that Dread does really good with their releases, is that they take these indie films and they give them a lot of like extras. So Harpoon, if you haven't checked it out yet, but you should if you listened to the last episode.
And make sure to get the Blu-ray, and that's where that commentary, you can find that commentary. And then there's a really good 30-minute kind of behind-the-scenes documentary he's really proud of too. So he shares some of some amazing stuff right after we stopped recording. So.
Of course. But it was an anecdote too good to pass up. I had to toss it in here. And then another movie that I watched is it's not old, but it came out this summer. I finally saw Crawl.
Oh my God, you finally saw it?
Yeah, I saw it a week or so ago, and I loved it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic, a good creature feature. I'm always down for aquatic horror. I think aquatic horror is amazing. And so yeah, have you guys seen that one yet?
I loved Crawl.
Yeah.
It was just so much better than I was expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, but I like Alexander Aja. He's kind of hit or miss, obviously, but I like his stuff for the most part, and so I thought, okay, why not? And it was just so much fun. I saw it, unfortunately, alone at 11 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, which was probably not the best way to see it, because I was the only person laughing and kind of having a good time with it, because there were so few people there. But I still had an amazing time. I think it was great. I think it was one of those movies where they knew they didn't need a lot of story. They just needed a bare bones kind of explanation, and then just to go right to the giant alligators. So I loved it.
And I love the heart that was in it. Like the emotional story beats really worked for me with the daughter and her kind of semi estranged father. I thought that kind of worked really well. But yeah, those are the two that I saw. What about you, Mary Beth?
So the one that I want to talk about is In Fabric, which I know has been kind of talked about a lot, but it finally came to theaters near me. And so In Fabric is Peter Strickland's new film about a haunted dress, basically. And have any of you guys seen it? Have you had anyone had the chance to see it?
I haven't caught that one yet.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't really know what the distribution is what is happening right now. It was at my theater in my hometown for like a week, but basically it's wild, kind of like a giallo, kind of campy, and it was a lot of fun. It was very much his weird style, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I know A24 is handling that one. Because I literally just got the press invite for LA, which I can never go to because I don't live there. But I always get the invite, and it's like, oh, cool, wish I could go. But I think so. It's hitting theaters December 6th, and then it'll probably hit Blue next year.
Okay, yeah, I don't know why it was at my theater. I guess there's like been tiny little releases, and then it's going wide. I have no idea.
Yeah, I know it's playing the Alamo near me one night for like their October. Every night they do a movie. It's hitting there for that one night, and I really would like to try to go see it.
It's definitely someone described it as Suspiria but with a dress, but like original Suspiria, and that's a really good way to describe it. I wish there had been a little bit more kind of going into the lore behind everything, but at the same time it was a super entertaining, weird, trippy thing, and I'm so glad I got to catch it in theaters. So cool. That's what I have been watching. Ryan, what about you? Have you watched anything that you want to talk about?
I mean, for me, the two big ones that are, obviously the Creepshow TV show that just hit Shudder, the first episode, which I fell in love with right away. I'm a huge fan of comic books, so I actually have always been a big Creepshow fan. Back in the MySpace days, my name was actually Ryan Creepshow.
Oh my god.
Oh. That's awesome.
Yeah. Inspired by Ryan Rotten. I was like, I want a cool last name. So, yeah, I was Ryan Creepshow. So, really enjoyed the first episode of that. I mean, I love seeing any Stephen King adaptation. And then I thought the second story by Josh Malerman, who did Bird Box, was very different tonally for most of the Creepshow stuff, but still fit into that universe very well.
I actually really enjoyed the way that one was filmed. It surprised me that I could be so like intimidated and so tense from watching inanimate objects.
Yeah, the way they handled it, I loved. She'd look away for a second and they were changed. I thought it was just really smartly done. And then I know Terry saw this one, but Joe Begos' Bliss.
Oh my God, Bliss!
Damn it! That's coming to theaters, this Friday near me,
and
so I think I'm holding out to see it until I can see it on a big screen.
Please do.
Yeah, if you can do. I've been a fan of Begos. I really liked Almost Human when that dropped in 2014, and I'm a big Graham Skipper fan. Graham and I are like kind of friends online, so when I got this one, I was super stoked. I love vampire movies, and this
hell yeah.
Yeah, this movie rules. Can we curse on this show? I don't know.
Yes, we sure
fucking
can.
Hell, no, you sure fucking can't.
Cool, because this movie, like as the kids say, this movie fucks. Like,
it's my favorite phrase of all time is like this movie.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, this fucks. Man, it really hits the gas. It feels so punk rock, guerrilla metal, like. I never knew where it was going, and it just kept tripping me up, and it's so bloody and so like psychotropic. Like I fell in love with it. I think it's going to be really high up on my list of like end of the year. I'm like sitting here crossing fingers that we get some new, like this kickstarts a vampire movement, because I really like vampire movies. Yeah,
please. I just watched Vampire's Kiss, the Nicolas Cage movie today, and I know it's weird, but I'm obsessed with vampires, and I want there to be a new vampire movement. Please and thank you so badly.
And I love so I'm a big fan of both styles. Like I love Victorian era. Like one of the first horror movies I ever saw was 1931's Dracula. And I really love Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. So I liked an interview with the vampire, all great, but I also really like the raw, like visceral, like 28 Days Later, or no, 30 Days of Night. Sorry, 30 Days of Night.
Oh my God!
Vampire.
Yes,
Beth was just talking about that one.
I talk about it. I think I've talked about it every
All the
episode
time.
we've recorded so far, which
I think
is
so.
hilarious, and I will figure never to stop talking about it.
It's an amazing movie, super under. Josh Hartnett, Ben Foster. I mean, the cast is incredible. I love that movie too. But yeah, so I hope this, like, if anyone listening, it's, you know, if you can't see it in theaters, definitely do. But if not, VOD, just go watch it. Support indie horror, but also it's just an incredible. And you know, you get Graham Skipper, you get Jeremy Gardner, so you get like all your little indie horror people. It's super fun.
That third act, man, I'll tell you what, that third act just goes for broke.
Dude, it's great. That movie, like I said, I just kept. I mean, I've been watching horror movies now for 28 years or whatever, and like I know the beats pretty well, and that one just kept. I was like, what's happening? This is insane.
I can't wait
crazy.
to see it.
I can't wait to hear your thoughts.
Okay, so talked about now. Let's go back to the past.
Yeah.
Ryan, what movie did you bring with you today?
Yeah, so the movie that I brought to the table is the 1975 classic, and in my opinion, the best movie ever made, Jaws.
Perfect. So, well, just for listeners who haven't seen Jaws, and I'm so sorry you haven't, please remedy that. We'll get you up to speed before we dive in to this, like, the horror aspects. So, here on Scarred for Life, we've been on a kind of a Steven Spielberg kick for the past few weeks. We talked about Poltergeist, Arachnophobia. He produced both with Rob Grant. We talked about Indiana Jones. And we're going to keep that going with his 1975 classic, like Ryan said, Jaws. So this takes place in the fictional beach town of Amity Island, where summer is in full swing, which means lots of tourists and lots of money. But that's all on the brink of falling apart when a massive great white shark begins snacking on unsuspecting swimmers. Police Chief Martin Brody, played by Roy Scheider, wants to close the beaches, but the mayor refuses, especially with the 4th of July coming up. Brody forces the issue, and the town offers $3,000 to the local fishermen, who eventually kill a tiger shark, and the town is saved. Except not. And eventually, Chief Brody, new-to-town marine biologist Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss, and eccentric fisherman Quint, Robert Shaw, end up on a barely seaworthy ship to take down the giant shark. Drinking, story swapping, and chumming, both literal and figurative, abound. Hooper gets in his cheap cage, the ship sinks, Quint, gets bitten in half, and Chief Brody gets to look super cool as he shouts his most iconic line and blows the shark out of the water. So, Ryan, what scared you the most? Like, what scene or scenes scared you the most in Jaws?
So I love the movie as a whole, but definitely the scenes that really, really frightened me. I mean, that opening scene where Chrissy Watkins is, you know, skinny dipping and being pursued by a boy who is too drunk to get into the water with her, and she is attacked by this unknown, unseen assailant. You know, we're getting those shots of her from underwater. We're seeing her like thrashed around violently. She grabs onto the buoy. She's still carried away, and then eventually they find her remains. I saw this movie when I was 4 years old.
Oh my God!
I was just gonna ask,
me
how
too.
old were you?
Yeah,
I also saw it when I was 4.
Yeah, so I was 4 years old. So like, and I also saw it on TV originally. So it's not like I saw.
Okay.
I didn't see like a box. I didn't see a poster. I'm just sitting there watching this thing that's on TV called Jaws. I don't know it's about a shark. I'm 4 years old. So, like, you know, what this woman is being murdered, and I don't understand how. And then it's not until, you know, obviously we know the shark is there, but then for me, like, that scene where Brody is chumming the waters and we see for the first time, like, that full headshot of Jaws emerging. Yes. Yeah, scared the shit out of me, man. And then Quint getting eaten. That whole scene is so harrowing and like super traumatic. And I mean, just to top it all off, like, why this movie like scared the shit out of me. I'm not kidding you. I got done watching it. My mom walks downstairs with my little brother, and she's like, "What are you doing? We're going to the lake. Get ready."
No.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah, and my 4-year-old brain can't comprehend that sharks aren't in lakes. And
Right.
So we went to the lake, and I'm to this day, I cannot swim in water that I can't see under me. Like if I can't see under me, because immediately in my head, my body becomes the poster to Jaws. Like that's what I see in my head if I'm swimming in any water. Yeah.
It's funny that you say that because I don't remember exactly how old I was when I saw this movie. It was kind of a blur, but I might have been that young. I know I was young, and I know I saw it before I saw some R-rated movies like Alien, and I saw that when I was 8. So somewhere between that time frame, I saw this movie, and I lived in Alaska, and even still, we had like indoor swimming pools in Alaska, and I was taking swimming lessons, and I did not want to swim on my back because I didn't want to see what was underneath me. I was afraid there was going to be a shark there. So I completely understand that feeling.
I also had that fear of sharks coming in a pool, and also in my bathtub and in my toilet.
Oh.
After seeing Jaws. I understand how irrational that is. But any water meant a shark could come out. In my small person brain, I didn't know. But all I could imagine was like a shark somehow coming up out of my bathtub, and an indoor pool, and any kind of pool, and a toilet. Yep. I just water terrified me. I couldn't go swimming at the beach for years.
I was lucky that I didn't have beaches around me. Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just going to say, I've never been, I can't do beaches. I don't want to swim. And, I tell people I have an illogical fear of sharks because I understand now that it is illogical. Everyone always rattles off statistics. They're like, oh, you blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's an illogical fear. I understand that it's not logical. It doesn't make any sense. I know that I have a better chance of getting, hit by lightning or winning lottery than I do of getting eaten by a shark. But in my brain, it's the one, my brain goes, you're the one. You're the one that's going to get eaten by the shark.
And logic doesn't really matter because, as you will know by now, if you listen to the previous episodes, I am deathly terrified of spiders. And I understand that most spiders are not going to hurt me, and it has really nothing to do with that. I cannot stand seeing them on the TV. I can't stand seeing pictures of them. So I completely understand that fear, 100%.
And so, Ryan, you were talking about the beginning when she gets killed. The part that really freaked me out was when they found, I think it was her arm with the crabs on it.
Yep.
That scared the absolute shit out of me because I feel like in horror movies, we don't really see the blood or anything, and because it was dark, you kind of can rationalize it away and not think about the violence or the death. But then you see her body part covered in crabs, and it just becomes very real very fast. And, that really got to me. And this was a film that my grandfather thought that was fine for her to show me when he was babysitting me when I was 4. And then my mom was so mad for so long because I wouldn't go swimming in the ocean at the beach. And she was like, you're supposed to love the beach. You love to swim. And I'm like, not anymore. And so this is actually pretty funny because I used to work on Shark Week for Discovery Channel, and
Did you really?
Yeah. So I used to do a lot of work with sharks, and I actually ended up swimming with sharks recently, and it all kind of came full circle where my fear of sharks became this very big passion and love for sharks because it became an obsession of mine because I have OCD, so a lot of my fears I get obsessed with. And I try to rationalize them. And in some cases, it doesn't actually work out. But in this case, I actually kind of got over it, which was nice. But that's not going to happen for everyone, obviously. But
yeah, what's that called? Immersion therapy.
Immersion therapy. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I could do it. No. And it's strange. I love sharks. I obviously, because I'm a normal human being with a good heart, I don't ever want people to kill sharks. I understand that sharks are not these. Yeah, it breaks my heart when I see videos of people just killing sharks for the sake of killing sharks. It's awful. Even though I'm terrified of them. But people I know a lot about sharks because I was a very nerdy child, so my way of irrationalizing my fear was reading up on it. I was like, I'm going to learn everything about sharks. So I know where they are, and I know how to beat them, and I know their weaknesses. And so, I was also a comic book kid, so I was like, everything has a weakness.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm like, dolphins, I'm friends with dolphins. They beat up sharks, and I can poke it in the eye. Exactly. So I know a lot about sharks. And I kind of like you, I have actually become kind of obsessed with I'll watch every shark movie. I watch Shark Week obviously all the time, and people are always like, "Aren't you terrified of them?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, but of Jaws in particular, not yeah." It's an illogical fear. Again, I know that Jaws is not in the ocean, but I'm afraid of Jaws really more than a shark per se.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So it's interesting. I want to kind of piggyback off both of your points. When I was a kid, this movie affected me to the point that if a shark documentary was on television, I wouldn't want to leave my couch because I was afraid the shark would get me on the ground.
Oh yeah,
no.
100%.
I imagined myself in like the cage, and I was like, I can't leave. So I would sit there and I would watch the entire documentary because I wouldn't be able to get up. So there's that, and it's interesting that I had a kind of a different trajectory. I wanted to be a marine biologist after this movie. I wanted to go out there on the sea and be Matt Hooper. I wanted to go study sharks. I wanted to go swim with them. And I'm a little jealous of you, Mary Beth, because I have a story.
Ooh, okay.
Back in the early 2000s, one of my friends was in the military. She was in the Navy, and she was stationed at Pearl Harbor out in Hawaii. And so it was like her last year. She was getting out. And so we were like, okay, we're going to go visit you because we have a place to crash. All we had to really pay for was, the trip there. And so we get there, and she's like, well, what do you guys want to do? And the only thing I wanted to do, I was like, I don't care what we do, but I want to go in a cage with sharks in the water. And we found a cage. We found a person that would take you out, and they had a cage out there, and we'd go and you'd be able to go in the water. But it was so windy while we were there that the only time we could do it was the day before we left. So the four of us go out on a boat. We go out there. We go out to the cage, and it was two of my friends were like together, and so they were going to go in together in the cage because it was two people at a time.
Okay.
And then there was me and my friend Jamie, who was the one we were visiting, and then there was another couple that we didn't know that because they sent a whole bunch of people out. So Jamie freaked out, and she was going to go with me. So she was like, "Can we go last?" And I was like, "Okay, that's fine." And so my two friends go in, and they have a great time. They got some great pictures, and I mean, we're not talking like huge sharks. I think
I was going to say, what
like
kind of sharks? What kind of
there
sharks
was nurse sharks. I know, like
Okay.
I mean, it were nothing really scary. And then the other two assholes went, and
No.
so the cage had like plexiglass, and they kicked out the plexiglass. In
What?
fear.
What?
How?
Yes, I don't know, but the plexiglass broke, and he pulled the thing up, and he was like, "Oh well," because it had a big gap in it. Like it wasn't a small little gap; it was a big one. A shark could get through, and so he's like, "Well, this is too unsafe to do it anymore," and so we had to leave. And it was the day before we left,
I'm
and
so
I
sorry.
did not get to go in the water with sharks.
Oh, that's the worst. I'm so sorry. So, not to brag, when I went diving with sharks, I did free diving. I didn't have a cage.
Oh no, that's exciting.
And it was my first time ever snorkeling, and I was in the Bahamas. It was one of my friends. Her husband is a shark researcher in the Bahamas.
Oh my gosh.
So I went to go visit them, and I went swimming. We were looking for hammerheads because they research. It's a hammerhead breeding ground down there in Bimini in the Bahamas, and so like Bimini is basically like a deserted island. You think the Bahamas, it's cute, it's gorgeous, but you have to fly into Nassau and then take a tiny plane to Bimini, and like there's no grocery store, so you're basically on a deserted island, which is really cool, and there's this like amazing marine life. So we went swimming, and actually a hammerhead swam up off the bottom and came up to me and bumped my leg.
Oh wow.
Which was really cool and kind of horrifying.
Well, yeah.
But they were very nice. Yeah, it was really cool.
That's
Ryan's
amazing.
probably like, what in the hell?
No, yeah. Everything you're saying's giving me anxiety. It just sounds like I just like if I were you, I would have been like, well, that was fate telling me not to get in that water because obviously the shark would have ate me.
And it was actually the opposite for me because I was trying to argue with the man about letting me go in by myself.
Please, sir, please. So,
Please let me have you lose your license if I get bit.
Terry, what scene or scenes like stuck out to you when you were younger when you saw Jaws?
So the scene that really got me the most, well, there was two. One was when the shark gets in the pond area.
Oh.
And the guy falls off the boat, and you just see under the water the shark on its side just like coming in. That like blew my mind as a kid. And then you see just the leg falling down to the bottom of the of the ocean, I was like, oh God, that hit me. And then of course the jump scare that they had to add in later, with where they're under the water and they find that the head pops out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wait, I didn't know they had to add that.
They did. So while they were doing the editing, they realized that it had been a while before they had a scare, and so they reshot that scene, and Steven Spielberg paid his own money for it because the studio would not allow reshoots, and they did it in a pool in the backyard of someone's house.
Oh.
And they added, they had a stunt double in for, you have a police, are they coming to get you?
Sorry.
They had a stunt double for Hooper, that was doing it, and they put milk powder or something in the water to give it that kind of...
Yeah, it's powdered milk.
Powdered milk, yeah. It's, I think, one of the most effective scares. I can't imagine the movie without it.
I agree with you.
I love that they threw that Spielberg recognized the movie needed that. It was after they did test screenings because there was such a big jump from when the shark is behind Brody when he's chumming, but while the test screenings were happening, he realized he's like, we need another jump scare like that. Mm-hmm. But he had, of course, at that point gone from a $4 million movie to a $9 million movie because of running for so long. I mean, the shoot ended up being, it was supposed to be 50 days. It was 159 days.
Oh, wow.
They were way over budget and way over time. And so the studio straight up was like, no. So he paid out of his own pocket to add that in. And then, of course, they didn't care because the movie ended up going to be the most successful movie ever made. So, at that time until Star Wars 2 years later.
So Ryan, you said that this is the best movie ever made. Why?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us why you think that.
It's interesting. It's not my favorite movie. It's close. It's almost one of my favorite movies. Scream is my all-time favorite movie.
Okay.
And so, if you catch me on the right day, it might be Halloween.
Okay.
But those two kind of switch back and forth. But I do think that Jaws is when I think of a perfect movie, I think of Jaws.
Okay.
And I think the reason Jaws is so perfect is there's so many things. One, I think to land on a perfect movie like this, you need that kind of unforeseen circumstance. Like the fact that they had to John Williams had to craft that score because Spielberg couldn't use the shark, so he needed a cue so people would understand when the shark was around. That's why they got that iconic score. The shark's malfunctioning all the time allowed Spielberg to go. He even says it would have been more like a Ray Harryhausen flick if the sharks had worked properly, but since they didn't, they had to go more Hitchcock, where it was you weren't seeing most of what was happening. And then I also just think the fact that he was smart enough and naive enough to do certain things. I mean, he had only done Sugarland Express up to this point, and that wasn't even out by the time he landed Jaws, and he was so very young and very bullheaded, so he thought, yeah, I can film on the ocean. It was the first movie ever filmed on the ocean. And it just doesn't happen very much anymore because it's so chaotic and so unpredictable. But I do think that there's something about it actually being filmed in Martha's Vineyard on the ocean that gives it a look and aesthetic that are almost impossible to capture, even with all of the technology that we have nowadays, because it looks so authentic.
I completely agree.
Yeah, I mean, even just rewatching it, all of the beach scenes, everything they do, all of the town stuff, all of the ferry stuff, it feels so real, and it's because they were actually there. And then I also, I love his decision to stay away from big name actors. The studio also, they wanted him to cast name actors, but he was like, okay, I will, but not big names. So instead he chose people like Roy Scheider, who had only really starred at that point in The French Connection, was his big one. Richard Dreyfuss had been getting buzz from he was suggested to Spielberg because of Lucas and American Graffiti, but he had just finished another film that wasn't even out yet but was getting good buzz. And then Robert Shaw, who was well known but was also kind of on the lam, weirdly enough. He was having he was evading taxes, so he really wasn't anytime they weren't shooting, he'd fly back to Canada. It's all very bizarre, but I think it what happened is it just was all these weird things it was a perfect storm. And it's so hard to capture that. So I think there's just like the perfect amount of human drama, which is funny because some critics, when it came out, actually knocked it for the human scenes being like boring. But I think the human scenes are like the scene where Brody is sitting at the kitchen table with his son is one.
I made a note of that.
God, I
Yeah.
love
I'm so
that
glad
scene
you're bringing that
so
up.
much.
It's one of the most intimate, like sincere scenes I've ever seen in a movie because it's the two of them, but it's about his wife watching them.
Yes.
Like that's what that scene is about, is the worry that she has for her husband and her family. And so that scene is so real and intimate. I think Dreyfuss is perfect as Hopper. His neuroses that shows through so brilliantly. Shaw literally based his character on people in Martha's Vineyard. So like that eccentricity was pulled from real life people. I mean, just every little thing they did. The mayor, that line that he delivers so perfectly of, people yell Barracuda,
Right.
but people yell shark.
Shark.
Yeah.
Yep.
We got to panic on the 4th of July. So I think it has a really just the right amount of all these elements: human drama, levity, like anytime they're drinking together, anytime it's almost like a buddy cop movie. And then just this really ominous, dreadful terror, and it all came together. And there's just, like I said, there's so many things. They tapped Carl Gottlieb is credited for the screenplay based on the Peter Benchley book, which Peter Benchley also wrote. But Spielberg also had parts. They ad-libbed a lot. Roy Scheider's line, "You're going to need a bigger boat," was ad-libbed. Robert Shaw ad-libbed a ton of his parts. They brought in a playwright to help with some of the dialogue. Howard Sackler was brought in with the dialogue. So there's just all these little things to create this like perfect. I just think it's like a perfect movie because it's tense, it's real, it's scary, it's funny. I don't know. I fall in love with it more every time I watch it.
So I wanted to piggyback. You mentioned Vaughn, the mayor. So watching it this time, I realized just how duplicitous he is. And I realized that there's one brief shot. Have you guys read the book?
I have.
I have not read the book, no.
So I read the book a whole lot when I was a kid. And I used to love it, and now I think it's not very good.
I agree. It is not very good.
What is the title of the book?
Jaws.
It's Jaws.
Oh, it's just Jaws. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like there's so much that Peter Benchley added in with like Ellen Brody is having an affair with Hooper.
Oh.
And Amity is basically a front for the mafia.
Oh.
Yes. And Larry Vaughn he doesn't want to close the beaches because he owes money to the mafia, and they're gonna come and basically kill him if he doesn't pay. So there's like a whole lot of that kind of sub story. But what I thought was interesting, and I caught it for the first time this watch, is there's a scene in the very beginning where you see Vaughn realty, and I think it's the only time that it's mentioned that he is in realty. So I think that there probably is still some of that semblance of that subplot. It's just not, spoken out loud.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And like even there's that scene on the boat where the medical examiner.
Yes.
Yeah, and the medical examiner has already told Brody it's a shark, and then under pressure from Vaughn, he's like, "Well, no, it's probably a boat motor." He's like, "You told me it was a shark. It's not. It's a boat motor."
Well, and they get he gets this whole posse together that includes the medical examiner, it includes the local paper, the reporter guy, and they basically browbeat him into accepting it that it's a propeller thing. And I can't help but think about fake news.
Oh, yeah.
All in the name of some extra money because of the tourist season.
Yeah, and I mean in the book, the reporter even has a bigger cover up. He covers up a lot more than in the movie. But even in the movie, he makes that comment to Vaughn about burying it as deep as he can in terms of the ad for the $3,000. He's like, "I'm going to run in the back with the grocery ads." So even in the movie and like a limited part, he's still covering up for the guy.
And that's Carl Gottlieb too. Fun fact.
Yeah,
the screenwriter for the film. And I know Benchley's in it too somewhere. He pops in. So Spielberg brought both of them in. But yeah, and like there's that part too where the frenzy is happening in the news office, and that's what they say. Like you hear someone say, she's running it in other cities and or in other towns because like they can't, now it's out of their control.
Right. And then even when they kill the tiger shark and he's like, oh, I want to get a picture. I want to send it to the AP. I want to send it to the UPI. I want to send it to all these, send it as far as Boston. He wants everyone to know, that it's over. The tragedy is over. We are good to go. We are not going to be eaten here at Amity. It's insane.
Yeah, that's another one of those scenes too that just like, it's funny, like, I mean, the movie, especially when you're 4 years old, this movie hits like real hard as a horror movie. Mm-hmm. I will fight anyone who tells me this is not a horror movie, by the way.
Me too, forever and ever.
Yeah, when people are like, oh, Jaws isn't a horror movie, I'm like, no. And what's funny now, especially to tangent a little bit, I was actually thinking about it because, Terry, I know you're a huge fan of Hereditary.
I am also a very huge fan of Hereditary.
And so Hereditary in particular is one for me that I think it stands out, but a lot of what A24 does in general, that when people come to me and they're like, oh, Jaws is like a drama with like, and it has like scary moments, or like it's an action movie. Like I think of Hereditary when people compare it to a drama, because I'm like, so is Hereditary. Like that movie is a family drama straight up.
Yep.
But it has scenes of terror in it, and like there's no way you like. I mean, she's literally like crawling on the wall and through the air. So like obviously that's a horror movie. And when people are like, well, Jaws isn't a horror movie, I'm like, it's a giant shark eating people. It is 100% a horror movie. Like this isn't Sharknado, this isn't like, it's not a comedy. It's not using giant sharks for the sake of using giant sharks. Like he has a kill count. It's a very real horror movie.
Yeah.
It's very dreadful. It's like the kind of film that I like to use the word dread for, because again, we don't really see the shark, but the moment where the two fishermen get pulled off, but then he's like holding onto the tire.
Oh yeah, and he just tells him, he's like, don't look back, just swim.
Yeah.
Just swim.
And so like those scenes, especially in the dark, are just so full of dread, and you don't really know, like what's underwater, but you don't really know at the same time, and it's horrifying. I mean,
yeah.
And it's another good, and it's even you have the nighttime aspects, but there's also at the beach, and it's another good example of daytime horror, which has been talked about quite a lot with Midsommar coming out this summer. Mm-hmm. It is another daytime horror movie. Things are happening. People are playing at the beach and having a great time, and then all of a sudden, people get sucked under.
Absolutely. That scene with Alex Kintner, that's another thing too. Like I wanted to point out was there are two impactful death scenes within the first 16 minutes of this movie. Like you kind of forget how fast Jaws hits the pedal.
Right.
Yeah. Like I every time I'm like, wow, that seems like the Alex Kintner scene in my head is always much later in the movie, but I'm like, oh no, it happens very quickly.
It really does. I also was always remembering it to be like a climactic scene, but not necessarily. It's like very much at the beginning.
It's kind of the inciting incident of the first act. And I think that's what I admire so much about, from a script perspective and from Steven Spielberg in particular, is that he's really good at economy of plot, so he gets things going. It's like he follows the screenwriting guide to a T in terms of like, well, this is when this should hit, this is when this should hit, and because of that, it books. And you don't realize that it's so quick that all this shit is happening, and then we're off to the races.
Mm-hmm. And then, so like, what I was saying too is, as a kid, it's a horror, like true horror, and now like it's, I feel like it hits in a different way. It's still horrific, but in really tragic ways. So the scene where Alex Kintner's mother approaches Brody,
God. I was gonna bring that up too.
That scene where she slaps him, and like literally the whole crowd is just quiet. And
it just guts me now.
Yeah, it kills me, and like it's heartbreaking. And so like that entire scene too is horrific in this whole other way of like, that's where I think this movie excels, is showing the real human side of this horror.
And even when she's calling his name standing in the water and you just see his yellow float.
Yeah.
The way that they're able to convey this violence without having it be as gory as it could have been, also super harrowing.
Right. And it's interesting now that we're talking about it as like an adult, because this time watching it the most, intense scene for me was actually the talk about the USS Indianapolis.
Oh, yes. Especially because
I
I
mean-
feel like when you're a kid, you have no idea what the hell that is.
Right, you're just like, can we get back to the shark parts?
I don't care about
But,
this
like-
weird old guy talking about a boat. Like,
Right, but like once you start to like hear him talk, and I was watching at lunch today, like a behind the scenes like almost documentary where they were interviewing people, and I guess the first time they filmed it, he was like, I'm gonna have a couple drinks beforehand, and they had to like wheel him on because he was so drunk and it was impossible to understand him, so they had to film it again, and then they kind of spliced the two together. But it's such a powerful scene. Just when you hear the way he's talking about it, he has so much charisma in that moment that it just really was like a gut punch for me.
And have you guys ever actually researched the USS Indianapolis?
yeah,
A little bit.
Oh man, it's really tragic. Do
Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
the Indianapolis?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the ship was struck by a torpedo and it went down, and 300 people died initially with the ship. They went down out of about 1,200. So there were 900 people left. 4 days went by before anyone even found them. And
they had just delivered the bomb, right?
Yes, they had just delivered the bomb, and then they were struck by a Japanese torpedo, and they went down. It was 4 days until anyone found them. It was just a patrol ship on routine, so it was that long in between. Obviously the ocean is huge, so it takes forever to go through places.
Because it was so secret of a mission, there was no distress call.
Right, there was nothing because they were pretty much like didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so 4 days went by, and so it was about 1,195 people, 300 about estimated went down with the ship, and between the 4 days on the ocean, it dwindled from 900. There were it's 365 survivors.
Yeah, something like that.
It's ridiculously small.
Yeah, it's the largest. And they account a lot of it, obviously, to like dehydration. A lot of them killed themselves or other members from hallucinations, but also tiger sharks.
It was tiger sharks and oceanic whitetips because
Yes.
Oceanic whitetips are kind of like scavengers of the ocean, and they swim and they really inhabit open water, and so they don't really get a lot of food. So when they when there's blood in the water and they can sense that there is prey, they're kind of picking people off. And so people, got upset about the sharks, but it's kind of in their nature, unfortunately.
It's in their nature.
Yeah.
And in the documentary I was watching, I skipped ahead to this part because I was really curious if they were going to address it. They had a couple survivors on in this thing, and they were talking about how, everyone was all together, but some people would hallucinate and swim out, and that's when the sharks would get them.
Oh no!
Or like it would bite someone's arm, and sometimes they would fight them off, and sometimes they wouldn't. And it's just. It's that story that just is like, oh, I just can't imagine floating out there for that long and just knowing that you're probably not going to be saved, and just the terror of that moment is just ugh.
And Shaw delivers that monologue so perfectly. It would have been so easy to gloss over, like, oh, we know this ship went down, and like we could even make up this stuff, like a ship went down in the ocean, you could assume sharks start eating people, but like the fact that it is based on this real ship and that Shaw was able to perfectly, like, his story I think nails it, like it's so terrifying, and like just the way that he's going through and talking about the sun would go down and then the sun would come up and there'd be less people, and as a kid, I remember the only thing I took away from that, my brothers and I used to like joke around all the time, and we'd look at each other and we'd go, like doll's eyes, because that line was so like it sticks out. But now I watch
That's
it, I'm
all
like,
I remember too as a kid.
Yeah, and I watch it. We made fun of it as a kid, and now I watch it, I'm like, that line is fucking horrifying.
Yeah.
Like that, like when he finally hits with it, it's so harrowing.
Yeah, he really sells that, and the fact that the camera just lingers on his face as he's telling it, it's just, it's an amazing performance. It is probably one of the best performances I've seen in movies, to be perfectly honest.
And
that scene.
It's funny because my cousin's name is Quint, not after him, but for his first birthday we had a sailor themed birthday party for him, and we had pictures of Quint, all like Captain Quint, all over the party.
That's amazing.
And we had Narragansett beer.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
That is awesome.
So, yep.
And the original, what's cool about Quint too is like, I mean, the Ahab parable is like very obvious, but in the original script, he went down by being dragged down with a harpoon through his leg. It was like a direct callback to Ahab.
Amazing, though very on the nose. It still would have been amazing.
Well, the ending of the book is just terrible, in my opinion.
I know Hopper dies, or Hooper dies. I know Hooper gets eaten, and I know Quint goes down with a harpoon, but that's all I remember about the end.
So the boat sinks, and Brody's in the water, and he's like basically praying to his god that, you know, that make it quick, because the shark is coming toward him. And then as the shark is moving toward him, it just sinks.
The shark sinks?
The shark just sinks.
What?
Because he was stabbed by a harpoon, and he bled out and died. And that's how Quint gets dragged down with them, because he's still attached to him from the harpoon, and he finally just dies from blood loss. And that's the end of the book.
Oh, that's really lame.
It's so dumb.
I know the movie had Jaws wasn't supposed to explode at the end of the movie. Like, Spielberg put that in because he was like, we need something bigger. Like, we needed a bigger payoff for the audience after pulling them through this, through like all this terror. We need a payoff for them.
And Peter Benchley's on record saying that he hated that when it was proposed to him. He's like, that doesn't make any sense. That's not how it would work. It's not going to blow up. And Steven Spielberg's remark was something to the effect, I've had him for 2 hours. They're going to believe this last 3 minutes.
Smile, you son of a bitch.
Yes.
Oh, it's so good. I love Spielberg. Spielberg's one of my all-time favorite directors too, and it's definitely, I mean, Jaws is definitely one of the reasons why. It's so rare too. Like, I mean, I know he had Sugarland Express and everything, but like, this is his, you know, big first feature, and just, I don't know, to get it so right, it's amazing. And also, sometimes I think about it and I'm like, that sucks, because now you're the guy who has to follow up Jaws. Like, right. I feel that way for Jordan Peele sometimes. I'm like, when he may Get Out, I was like, that sucks for you. Same with Ari Aster. I'm like, okay, good luck, dude. And I think they've all done successful things, but like, it's still just so hard to replicate something like that.
It's hard when you come out the gate with something that is basically a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I like I said, I do think it is as close to perfect as a movie can be.
Mm-hmm. So, Ryan, was this a film that got you into the horror genre?
You know what? It's not.
It's not? Okay.
Yeah.
It was.
So, I actually got into the horror genre through comic books.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Tales from the Crypt or stuff? Or?
No, so I was, again, at 4 years old, I somehow convinced my mom to buy me an X-Men comic book. And it was X-Men number 159, which is X-Men versus Dracula.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I fell in love with both at the same time. I fell in love with horror and comic books on the same day. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and my mom was, it's weird, like, my mom was strict-ish, like, I had no bedtime as a kid, and like I could play video games all night as long as I like went to school and did things, like kept my grades up. But I couldn't play like rated mature video games or watch rated R movies. So it was funny, like growing up, all the kids wanted to spend the night at my house, even though we couldn't watch rated R movies or play or like do mature video games, because my mom let us stay up all night, that was much more enticing as children.
Yeah, for sure.
But she was kind of strict with movies. I fell in love with horror movies, but she didn't watch horror movies, so she didn't know what was appropriate or not. So her rule was anything that's black and white.
Oh boy. Oh, that.
Yeah.
Still a lot of possibilities there.
Yeah. But I stuck it out with Universal, and so 1931's Dracula is the movie that sucked me in.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It was the movie that made me fall in love with horror, and it just grew from there. It's not even close to my favorite.
Right.
I have a nostalgic love for it. It's not even my favorite Universal. That's Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh, cool.
I agree with you there.
Yeah. But yeah, that was the one that got me. But Jaws is like one of those ones that like I remember it terrifying me as a kid, and then when I went back and rewatched it, I was like, I don't know. Maybe it scared me too much that I was like, yeah, I don't want to watch anything like this if it's going to scare me that bad. But now I just think it's masterclass.
And what horror comics would you recommend to someone who wants to get into comics that love horror?
Hellboy is a really, really fun entry into horror comic books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really love all the folklore stuff. I'm really into like legends and folklore and mythology. So Hellboy does like a lot of really cool stuff there. If you want something that's actually really scary, I would suggest checking out Scott Snyder's Severed.
Oh my God, Severed is so good, and it's only one like trade paperback issue.
Yeah,
so
and
it's
I
super
love
easy
Severed.
to get into.
That one was really good. I really like all of. I'm a Snyder fan, so American Vampire was also like I was really into American Vampire.
Have you guys read Witches?
Yeah,
Yes,
also
I
Scott Snyder and Jock.
Witches.
Yep, Jock.
Yeah.
His art is amazing.
Joe Hill's Lock and Key, I was a really big fan of, and
I
that
love
one's
that.
like really kind of weird. And those are some of my favorites. And I do really enjoy going back and reading like old Tales from the Crypt, like EC Comics, and also Marvel Unlimited's a great. I have a column on Dread. We'll see after the news that broke today. I don't know if I still have a column on Dread, but I have a column on Dread that's called Horror Unlimited, and I just go back and I read old horror comics on the Marvel Unlimited app. So the Tomb of Dracula, Man Thing, Son of Satan, Werewolf by Night, all of those are just like super fun old school horror comics.
Also, plugging, if you didn't really like 30 Days of Night the movie, I recommend the graphic novel.
The graphic novel is really
amazing, and the art style by Stephen.
Temple Smith. Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful, weird, like watercolor-y, almost abstract art. It's just an absolutely gorgeous graphic novel, and there's a series of them, but you can read one, and the first one is like the first movie contained.
After that movie came out, I went like on an IDW tear, and like because
me too.
produced a whole bunch of like horror comics.
Yeah,
I loved that comic series. That was really good.
That's a really cool X-Files 30 Days of Night crossover series, which is like my two favorite things smashed together.
Well, I think that about wraps us up. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us to talk about Jaws. So where can the listeners find you, and do you have anything you want to plug that's happening soon?
So you can find me online. I mean, anywhere. I'm at Ryan Larson on Twitter. I'm at Ryan Writes Left on Instagram, or at Ghastly Grinning on both of those as well. At Screaming Cast for the podcast. Ghastly Grinning is launching its own podcast within the next month. That's going to be I'm pitching it as it's a late night style to horror podcast. So the first half of it will be like kind of like games and just like little segments. Awesome. And then the last half will be interviews. But I am specifically trying to interview people that don't get enough credit, mainly journalists.
Cool.
So I have a lot of journalists lined up. I know Anya Stanley's going to be on. I mean, obviously, I would love both of you on. Molly Henry's going to be on. So just a lot of like really awesome. Nat Bremer is one of my all-time favorite writers in the horror genre. So they'll be popping in and out. And then I'm working on. This is the one I'm really passionate about. I'm working on a charity event called Horror Heals, and I'm working alongside Stop the Stigma, which is a charity fundraiser that everything they do is about normalizing mental health and destigmatizing mental health.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and so they all of their profits and proceeds go to helping people who don't have access to mental health. It goes towards helping families understand mental health. I know they do like therapy sessions for people who have no means, and also they put out a lot of like literature and just a lot of stuff online, just like kind of breaking it down and trying to make it part of the everyday vernacular and conversation, make it okay to talk about mental health. So I'm working alongside them with a project called Horror Heals, where I have been lucky enough to, again, as I said at the beginning of the episode, I've been doing this for about 8 years. I've made some friends along the way, and I've reached out to actors, screenwriters, directors, producers, and they're all going to donate things from horror movies, and we're going to sell them, and 100% of the proceeds will go to Stop the Stigma.
Oh
so,
Ryan, that's amazing.
Yeah,
that is so cool.
Yeah, I got really upset that horror got such a bad stigma because I have mental health issues, and I've been like horror has honestly dragged me out of a very bad depression 2 times now in my life. like I literally say all the time, like, horror saved my life. And so I want to break down those walls, and I want to give back to the community that has given so much to me. So yeah, I'm working alongside them, and hopefully we'll have some really cool people to announce. I have some stuff that are still in the works, but some of the people donating, Rebecca McKendry will be donating, Luke Petrosky, who wrote Super Dark Times, Lauren Ashley Carter, Graham Skipper, Owen Egerton, who made the Bloodfest movie. So we got some really awesome people that are going to help along with that charity.
Amazing.
That's fucking awesome.
We'll definitely keep an eye out for all of that and make sure to push it on all of our...
Yeah, we'll plug it for sure.
Yeah, and that will be officially announced soon. We wanted to get it in time for Halloween. It doesn't look like it's going to happen because I'm still working with Stop the Stigma and all the, like, there's a lot of politics involved and a lot of, like... You got to get, like, a government number for charities and everything like that. So, we're working on stuff like that. But once it's officially announced, I will let you guys know.
Cool.
Perfect. Thank you.
So, you've heard all from us, but now, listeners, we want to hear from you. What is your experience with Jaws? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, and we might feature you in an upcoming episode. You can also reach us out You can also reach out to us on Twitter. I'm at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, tag us at Scarred Podcast if you want to talk about the podcast on Twitter.
And if you're listening on the 21st, just remember that today is the last day to get your ratings and reviews in to win one of those awesome Mondo posters. If you're listening after that date, sorry, the contest has ended. But we'll announce the winner during our 4th episode that launches on November 4th.
Thanks, everyone, and stay creepy.
As a person with a very deep voice, I'm hired all the time for advertising campaigns. But a deep voice doesn't sell B2B, and advertising on the wrong platform doesn't sell B2B either. That's why if you're a B2B marketer, you should use LinkedIn ads. LinkedIn has the targeting capabilities to help you reach the world's largest professional audience. That's right, over 70 million decision makers all in one place. All the big wigs, then medium wigs, also small wigs who are on the path to becoming big wigs. Okay, that's enough about wigs. LinkedIn ads allows you to focus on getting your B2B message to the right people. So, does that mean you should use ads on LinkedIn instead of hiring me, the man with the deepest voice in the world? Yes. Yes, it does. Get started today and see why LinkedIn is the place to be to be. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system. If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.